Okay, now we're going to look at Erikson and talk about Erikson's ideas and him really building on Freudian background. So he did understand psychodynamics and especially psychoanalytics or psychoanalysis. And he does see connections there, but he's going to build his own theory and his own model of what we go through in life under a psychosocial development. So Erik Erikson is a Freudian psychoanalyst, which means he followed and learned a lot and studied Freud, but he also comes across this theory on what we go through our entire life. And we call this the stages of psychosocial development. Psycho meaning mind, and social, how you interact, your mind interacts with the world around, other people. And he broke it into several stages that we go through. The first is trust versus mistrust. Now, this stage, according to him, occurs during basically 0 to 1, your first year of life, and infants decide whether the world is friendly or hostile. And what this really is contingent or dependent on is whether they can trust their basic needs being met. So the relationship between them and their mother, their father. If the mother is affectionate, if the mother gives milk and changes their diapers, they are more likely to trust the world under this theory and become more likely to interact with people in a positive way. If the mother is cold or the father is cold and they can't trust that their needs are going to get met, then they might become more savage or more towards their acting in a animalistic way where they want to survive, and more survival becomes the focus versus positive relationships with others. Now, next he says at age 1 to 3, we go through this autonomy versus shame and doubt. Child must develop a sense of control over your bodily functions as well as their environment. So the kid, or toddler as we would say, 1 to 3 year old, is really trying to assert themselves. They'll be like, that's mine, that's mine. And they're trying to assert and take things for themselves. Some things like throwing things are the child's trying to learn what's called cause and effect. If you throw something and you give it back to them, they're learning that if they throw it, they'll get it back. That's cause and effect. The brain is developing. But he's arguing that under Freud, that you start to interact with your body, and they're like, I'm pee-peeing, and they're urinating, they're pooping. And if anybody's been a parent and they've had a 1 to 3 year old, your first 3 years of life are pretty much poop and pee all the time because it's a natural body function and the kids are trying to understanding it. But he felt that they felt shame and doubt or about their bodies, but they also are trying to assert themselves and be autonomous, which means on their own or individualistic. All right. So the next stage is initiative versus guilt. And initiative versus guilt, this stage occurs about 3 to 6 years of age. And also it corresponds to the child's entry to a broader social world outside of the home. So children are starting to leave the house with their parents and friends, go to preschool. They're really learning to assert themselves socially without overstepping boundaries. So they're trying to understand, like, what is it where this is mine, and no, the adults should come in hopefully and say, hey, look, guys, if you can't both play with the toy at the same time, we're gonna have to take turns. So they're learning to share. They have to learn these boundaries that they can't have the toy all the time. They can't dominate the toys or the time of the teacher or the parent. They're going to have to take turns with their brothers and sisters. And then they might feel guilty about themselves. They feel bad because they're told they're being bad or what they're doing is bad. And they're trying to figure out how do they assert themselves and do things without being a bad boy or girl. Next is industry versus inferiority. Children ages 6 to 12 are in this stage. Now they're definitely in school. If they're not in preschool before, which is very important because if you go to preschool, you're 20% more likely usually on average to go to college, and you're also 20% less likely to be incarcerated or go to jail. They accustomed to receiving feedback from their work. They start to get used to the teachers, like, okay, why'd you do that? Okay, could you do it this way? And let's do our ABCs. Let's learn things. They take pride. They want to please the teacher. They want to please their parents. They want to be a good boy or a bad boy is what other psychologists might say that, They're trying to really show that they're productive or industrious. Uh, but also they could feel a sense of inferiority, like inferior because they're being criticized. They might not like that. They might not see smart, or they feel like they can't do things. They're trying to learn this. Now, a lot of teenagers, or we're going to say adolescents, he thinks go through identity versus role confusion. And this stage, it involves adolescents searching for identity. Adolescents are questioning what type of person they are. They're beginning to develop their own values at this stage. They're starting to question what their parents have taught them is right or wrong. Their friends are influencing them on what's right or wrong. We've talked about the whole snitching thing. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from prison culture, this idea that if you snitch on somebody or you tell on somebody and you guys are both doing a crime, you sell out your girl or your boy so you could get out of jail. But you'll throw them and get them in trouble. That's snitching. But now that's kind of come out in a culture where people are like, no, snitching is only telling on everything and anything, right? And the whole point is that bad guys or criminals want you to be scared to say something. So if they're hurting people, they know that you're the kind of person who won't say anything on the block. So they could do bad things on the block. Now, the resolution of this stage is fidelity or truthfulness with oneself. Are we being honest with ourselves, he says? Are you identifying, who you are as a person? Are you a good person? Are you a good student? Are you a good son or daughter? Are you a good brother or sister? What do you believe? Do you have religious beliefs? Do you have philosophical beliefs? Are you starting to challenge us there? Adults might not be the only authority anymore. You yourself are trying to identify and see yourself for who you are. And that might be different than what parents and society and everybody expects of you. Now, next is intimacy versus isolationists. And he's going to say most of this is going to be early adulthood. So you're talking late teens, if not college mostly. And you're starting to build these relationships, maybe your senior, junior year. And you're thinking of how important these relationships are. Am I falling in love? Am I maturing? You have feelings of isolation or lack of intimacy may result. Like you feel like I don't have a girlfriend, I don't have a boyfriend, or like nobody likes me, my friends aren't around. These kind of feelings he would say you're having. We see a lot of isolationism in teenagers, especially, older the teenagers get, they start to cut away. But also it could be the opposite where you're feeling intimate, and intimacy is not always of a nature of sexual nature. It could be intimacy is like I have a close relationship with my sister. That seems to be the strongest bond, sisters, and then brothers, siblings. Also your friends. You could feel like a friend is like your sister, but one time removed, but your sister, it's not blood because you're so close. Also, you get boyfriends and girlfriends, or people, identifying with different genders. And you start to see yourselves identifying with different groups of people. Like we coach esports, so the esports kids kind of get along and they identify they have common goals. They like to compete and they like to win, but they also like to play video games, and that's fun to them. So that's who am I? But also I'm starting to fall in love with and really get to know my friends. College is really going to challenge me, or after high school. If I'm going to work or go to trade school, my life's going to change. Next is generativity versus stagnation. So this is adult life after that, which, I'm going through. And I'm playing these roles as a father and being productive and a teacher and trying to, be productive in my career and my house and take care of my son. And how to deal with these balances of like, how do I get all my chores done? But then how do I do all my work? Make sure all my grades are done. How do I be an esports coach and make sure we got the best esports team? I'm trying to balance all these things, kind of juggle all these different ideas, and being productive is very important to me. And he calls that productivity generativity. Is like I'm focused on being productive, a good productive person, and at the same time maybe not feeling at all of these things, like feeling like, man, I'm not a very good father. I could do a lot better job. Or man, I'm not a very good teacher. I could be a much better teacher. Or, and I could do a much better job at this. Now, the next is integrity versus despair. And this is towards the end of your life. And you're kind of coming into this point where you're coming to the end. You're seeing that life comes to an end and you have to accept your successes and failures. But most people want to focus on the positive outcomes in this stage of wisdom, whereas failure can cause you to feel bitterness and despair. You're angry at people, or I had a bad life, or you're angry at yourself. I treated people badly, or there's so many more things I could have done with my life. I can't believe I missed all those opportunities. Or I wish I would have been a professional musician like I always dreamed. Or I should have been a better father, or man, I retired too early, but you're trying to reflect on your life, and then you're trying to explain it to yourself as, okay, I'm going to die. Am I going to die and be remembered a good person? Did I actually help people? Will I go to heaven or will I go to hell? These are all questions. I can't control my body anymore. I'm getting slower. I'm having issues. So you're going through all these things where you're trying to say, no, I had integrity. I was a good person. And then at the same time, you're feeling kind of depressed, or maybe you could be bitter or feel a sense of despair if you didn't accomplish all the things you wanted, or if you had a bad relationship with your children or your wife. So we can see the chart here. You got the first one would be